Hello guys! If you're interested in psychology, stay here. But if not, you may click off and try other videos here or somewhere around here. So this video is actually dedicated to those who are interested in taking a psychology degree, to those who want to know what psychology is, or to those who are simply just confused what psychology is in general. So without further ado, let's jump straight right into the first topic of the day. Now, many people do not actually know what a psychology degree is, and especially in Asian countries, a psychology degree is not something that most people will opt for. In fact, because from what I'm aware of, many people who were interested in psychology eventually, especially in around my peers before I went to university, eventually chose not to take this subject in fears that they may end up getting unemployed in the future. But the truth is, what they don't know is that psychology may possibly be one of the few courses out there that is actually really broad when it comes to job scopes and future prospects after graduation. Because the fact is that most people would need psychology. Psychology is not something that you can avoid because it focuses on the study of human sizes, study of personality, and also mentality. Now, fun fact, even the most common thing that happens in a workplace couldn't escape from psychology. For example, office politics. It is a form of psychological manipulation. Charming potential customer, usage of psychology. Coming up with a good product that could appeal to the market, behavioral psychology. Basically, most of the things that happens, whether be it in your work life or your personal life, it is related to the study of psychology. So what matters here is not really about the psychology degree, or it's about what you do with the psychology degree. In fact, if you study common courses like a business degree, you will still need to apply your degree, not just own your degree, apply the degree in your future job places in order to excel in it. Now, there is mainly two pathways with a psychology degree. Either one, you branch into the clinical and social side of it, or two, you branch into the business or corporate side of psychology. The first thing to take note is that a lot of people have misconceptions thinking that a psychology degree means you can diagnose people, have therapy, perform hypnotization, like all those fancy stuff that you see on TV. Now, that's wrong. If you think that that's cool and that you would like to take a psychology degree because of it, basically by being a clinical psychologist, please think twice. Please do think twice about this. Because when you want to become a therapist to diagnose people, you need at least a master's or a master's degree. And that is a bare minimum requirement. Thereafter, you will be assigned to clinics and hospitals for practicals, or in medical term, we call it as housemanship. Just like what normal doctors would do. A normal housemanship period would be around 2 years, where after this period, you will usually be allowed to practice on your own, to diagnose on your own, and to even own your own clinic. Now, usually clinical psychologists would want to pursue PhD and perhaps later branch out in stuff that are more specific. For example, areas such as psychiatry, autism therapy, and speech therapy, etc. Now, take note of this. Being a psychiatrist is different than being a psychologist. A psychiatrist is allowed to prescribe medication, but a clinical psychologist is not. So basically, a psychiatrist would focus more on severe mental illness such as schizophrenia, and they will basically deal with people in the hospitals instead of dealing with them in a clinic or in the centers, etc. Now, if you think that you would like to deal with stuff that are more in-depth, then perhaps psychiatry is definitely a pathway that you could pursue. Now, note that throughout this entire process, whether you aim to be a clinical psychologist or just a psychiatrist, it is not all flowers and rainbows. The grass is not green. It requires constant reading, endless research, daily reports up to 4 to 6 times a day, depending on how many patients you have, and also a lot of exchange of views with your peers to just stay up to date with new treatments, new diagnoses, new guidelines, new skills, etc. Now, if you think that your personality is not that type of is not the type of person where you can just sit down in the office all day, face patient from AM to PM, and also read plenty of journals for your entire life. Now scratch this thought about being a clinical psychologist. It is definitely not your cup of tea. So long story short, a clinical psychologist is literally a scientist. In fact, psychology itself is science, and if you do not think psychology is science, please don't fight me on this, and please get your facts straight, because we use scientific methods. Okay, yeah, off topic basically, just to defend my course, but yeah, psychology is science, and being a clinical psychologist is basically a scientist. So they do what a scientist would normally do. So if you think being a scientist and facing research all day long is dull, boring, lame, and just difficult, so is being a clinical psychologist. So my camera just ran out of storage, and so I'm using my phone to film right now, and that's why I changed our scenery, and I will change our environment and change our scene. So yeah. Okay, back to it. So the second pathway that to pursue is either the social side or the business and corporate side of psychology, and basically every other thing except for a clinical psychologist. Now with a psychology degree, you're actually eligible to be a counselor. The difference between a counselor and a clinical psychologist is that the counselor usually listens, counselor gives advices, but counselor do not diagnose. As a counselor, you can even open your own clinic or like your own center, but you do not touch anything that is related to diagnosis. So if you're someone who's actually very passionate in like listening to people, you're good with people, and you are interested in helping people out, then yeah, you can actually, a counselor might be the pathway to go, because as counselors, it's just that you don't diagnose like clinical psychologists. You don't diagnose whether that person has depression, whether that person has bipolar, whether that person has BPD, or whether that person has any aggression, intermittent aggression disorder, or whatever it is. But you listen and you are there for the people. So that might be a pathway for you if you're interested in areas like this. Or if, like me, you're interested in the business side of psychology, you can continue pursuing a master's perhaps in business psychology, and then try to branch out and try to specify from there and learn things that is actually related to business, where you can apply the thought of psychology into the study of psychology into it. Now, truth is, to be able to actually target the market in a business world, you not only need data, you will also need mentalities, consumers' mentality, basically a behavioral psychology. Just like how psychology plays an important role in the domain of marketing, because the irony is that oftentimes data cannot determine the mentality of a consumer. So what we can do is we can actually use and apply psychology to determine whether this product can be a greater success together with the tool of data. That's why big data is so important in companies nowadays. And at the same time, maybe not in Malaysia, but in Singapore or in other Asian countries, psychology in business psychology is starting to get its pace, because they need behavioral psychology when it comes to targeting niche market especially. I know I've actually kind of focused a lot on this area, but the thing is, psychology is not only used in the business industry, it is used widely in industries such as the medical fields, where they actually need behavioral psychology to determine what kind of medicine to prescribe, what kind of medicine to use. And that is something that is kind of common in Singapore right now, the closest neighbor to us. So yeah, in short, taking psychology totally does not mean that you're going to get unemployed. But if you are considering taking the pathway of a clinical psychologist, then definitely this is something that might be a little bit competitive or a little bit limited in Malaysia, just like how pharmaceuticals is also limited. Pharmaceutics is also limited in Malaysia. But if you have the resources to actually go out and practice, you can actually go to countries such as Australia, Canada, where they take mental well-being and the overall well-being very seriously. And if you are actually pursuing clinical psychology in countries like that, the chances of you getting a PR over there is also really high. So that's about it. So the third point, what the heck do we actually study? Now, if you think that all we study is about reading people's minds, then once again, you are wrong, because we don't read people's minds. That's totally a wrong notion of psychology. In psychology, we actually study about theories. We study about famous people, like experiments like Milgram's experiment, and then psychotherapy, Sigmund Freud, and so many more that has been in the past, that are experienced in the past, where we study about it and we try to see how we can apply this in our studies nowadays. When we study psychology, we also learn about methodologies and learn about experiments, and we learn how to apply all these things that we have learned into our research and in future into our diagnosis. If you are trying to pursue a clinical psychology pathway, then you would have to remember all this. The thing is, we also use different types of methodologies. It's basically just like how scientific papers work, how scientists work, and how science came about. Science is a process of research, experiment, test. Science basically testable, something that is testable, hypothesis that is testable, refutable, and also falsifiable. That is one of the requirements of science being science, hypothesis being hypothesis. So whatever it is that a scientist would do to acquire the results, that is what we study about. And we even use statistics such as SPSS software to actually give meanings to numbers, give meaning to our results, and actually try to analyze what these results mean from all the data that is provided to us. Yeah, basically this is what we learn about. We don't learn how to read people's minds. It's not like how you see in like movies. We don't learn. In fact, I've never even been exposed to this area. But the thing about reading people's mind is that if you learn all these theories and you learn how humans would normally react, like the physiology of humans, like let's say we also learn about physiology where we learn about hormones and how it affects our brain, our behavior. So if you know all of this and you're equipped with knowledge regarding these areas, then when it comes to actually analyzing and looking at that individual itself, then you know how to read. So reading the people naturally comes after when you start to understand whatever it is that you have learned beforehand. So to sum up and to end, and because I'm getting tired from all the sitting, but yeah, to sum up and to end, should you actually study psychology? I would say definitely go ahead. Don't be afraid that psychology is uncommon in Malaysia. If you're interested in it, just go ahead for it. If you're interested in clinical psychology, pursue it, because in Malaysia we have a shortage of clinical psychologists. And the thing about it is that all we have known is that we know about mental illness. We know how severe mental illness is if it is not treated properly. We are always so worried about people committing suicide out of depression, but what we forget to actually take note of and pay attention to is that all these things can actually be avoided if we are more open to accepting mental health illness in our countries. In countries like this. So it is something that will help us move forward if our society in our country right now does not think that the topic of mental health is a taboo. So as a psychologist, the reason why I made this video today, even though it may sound a little bit boring or it may sound that it's like an off-topic thing and something that's unrelated to you, is just to actually raise awareness about the cause of psychology. One, what psychology is, and two, how important it is for you to pursue psychology if you are really interested in it. And thirdly, our responsibility as a student of a psychology degree to actually spread this out and actually try to change the perspective that people have towards psychology. And also, of course, definitely, if you have misconceptions, then you will have to clear it out. So that's why I made this video today, to let people know that mental health should be taken seriously. Secondly, what psychologists do, especially clinical psychologists in this area, that is very commendable when it comes to good practices of psychology, because what they are doing is actually they are making a change, even though it's a small change, but they are making a change bit by bit, day by day, to ensure that this taboo is not that serious in the future and try to change people's thoughts on it. So I would say, if you want to take it, go for it and take it. And if you have any inquiries about psychology, or if you are worried whether this is something that you should take or not, find someone to talk to, or if not, you can even find me and if you can ask me. I may be able to answer your inquiries about that, even though I'm not a professional myself, and even though I am not planning to go into the field of clinical psychology. But the reason why I would say, okay, perhaps before I end this video, I'll just share a short story why I wasn't interested in taking clinical psychology. In fact, I myself had the misconceptions of clinical psychology. I always thought, I knew that we had to take masters, but I thought that after taking masters, everything would be easy. But the thing is, when I went to a workshop and with my professor, they had a workshop here in my university, and they actually explained about what clinical psychology is. I realized that is a pathway that I do not want to take, because I am someone who does not like spending all my time in the freaking office. And I can read, I would enjoy reading, but I do not want to do this for my entire life. And that's why I didn't want to be a clinical psychologist. And I think that this is something that will be best suited for people with other qualities that is definitely better than I am. And if I were to take up this role, then I can't be my best. And if I can't be at my best, then it's also a disrespect to my patients, to people that come to me in the future. And that is why I decided to drop the thought of pursuing clinical psychology. And for me, most probably I will take a master's in business psychology, perhaps in future, or I don't know, because the future is unpredictable. That's why I always go with the motto that you apply your degree. You don't just get your degree. Getting the degree means nothing. Applying the degree after you have received it, that is the most important thing. So I've been talking for quite a long time right now, and I just don't want to meddle upon like unnecessary stuff. So I hope this video helps, and if you have anything, you can just hop onto my Instagram down below in the section below, in the description section bar below, or you can just contact me or anything. And yeah, I hope this helps, and see you in the next one. Peace.